You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in.
You guys know a lot of embarrassing things about me. None of it can be shared.
Stuff that we could put on LinkedIn.
Damn it, we don't have anything that we can use in the pre-show yet because we're too ridiculous.
So my embarrassing story is I used to practice dancing because I was embarrassed because I felt like I wasn't a good dancer. I used to practice in my mirror and like make sure I wasn't making like faces and things that would, you know, make people make fun of me at the bounty. And one night my mom, my bedroom ended up being at the end of my driveway and the two windows faced the driveway. So like when you drove in, you could see whoever was up top in my room doing whatever they were doing unless I closed the windows. So I didn't close my windows that night. I had my shirt off and I was practicing my dance moves in my mirror, and my mom literally watched me for 5 minutes and like we had to have a really weird conversation. So I would say if you like looked at embarrassing things that I can share on this podcast, I used to feel like I needed to practice dancing because I was so bad at dancing before I went to the bounty in the mirror. Yep.
Wow. I
think I've been there. We've all been there. That's not so embarrassing.
No, we haven't. Don't put me in that shit. I haven't been there.
Welcome back, everyone, to Remotely We Are One. I am your host, Rick Haney, joined by the fit and agile Kaleem Clarkson.
That is correct, sir. I am a solid, smooth 199 pounds.
Indeed. I am excited for today's episode. We're going old school, are we not?
We are going old school, man.
Old school for us.
Old school for us. Old school for us. I think we need to try to get some more old school guests that we've known for more than 20 plus years. I think it'll be great for the show.
This may be a new trend. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. So today's guest, interestingly enough, went to Worcester the same time I did. That's Worcester, Mass, for some of you that can't understand what I'm saying. But he's a former D1 player from the College of the Holy Cross. Got that right. Yep. Mm-hmm. He has a 10-year sales career for 2 large major insurance companies. He's worked with various startups. He was the president of a company called IBX. He was a senior vice president at Decisely, another venture-backed insurance company. And something that we found out today, he used to practice his dance moves in front of a mirror in high school before he went to the Bounty Tavern. That's right, people. Some of y'all know what we're talking about. It was this horrible chem-free club. Actually, it was not horrible. It was the best chem-free club inside of a hotel. But this dude used to practice his dance moves in front of a mirror, and his mom's caught him. His mom's caught him.
Well, you know what the worst part is? I just want to interject here. It was only a chem-free dance club on Sundays, which is when we all went. The rest of the week, it was 21 and up. And when we all turned 21, it was like the highlight of coming of age. Like, we don't have to come here on Sundays no more. This is going to be awesome.
Super sick. And we would get Milford martinis. What else would we get for drinks there?
Ladies walking around on ladies' night with 40-ounce glasses of Gorilla Milk. It was unbelievable. For those of you who don't know, it's Allen's Coffee, Brandy, and Whole Milk.
So, last but not least, he is currently the Senior Vice President of Sales at Layr. Listeners, viewers, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Josh Morse. Yes, Mr. Morse.
Welcome aboard, guy.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me on, embarrassing me, still liking me after 25 years, and having me on the podcast. I'm excited.
You've been embarrassed for 25 years. You're going to feel awful after this show's over.
It's not true. It's not true. We're nice to our guests.
Thank you for the kind intro, Kaleem. What I consider a good chem-free dance club is when you don't get shivved, shot, or stabbed. The chem-free club, I think it was a pretty happy place. So
yeah.
As far as childhood memories, that place was, I learned how to dance somewhat.
The Bounty Tavern.
Yeah, it was. The Bounty Tavern was an interesting place because it was originally a disco, and it kind of evolved as discos did into nightclubs and bars and restaurants. And it was this weird aesthetic. It was like a pirate ship that they built this pirate ship into the building. And, there were ropes and masts and all kinds of ugly shit. And it was a cool theme, but it was just weird.
I loved it. Good times, nostalgia. Yeah. I think I saw Rick. Was it you that printed a Bounty Tavern T-shirt for a minute? I think those were popular for a second.
Yeah, I used to sell those T-shirts that said "I danced on the speaker at Bounty Tavern," and that was the next comment I was going to make. Was that they had this giant speaker that was encased in like a wooden cabinet. And girls were notorious for climbing up there and, doing their thing. But that was like the thing to do, was climb up on the speaker.
It's perfect intro into like never have I ever. Well, never have I ever danced on top of the Bounty speaker. Good memories.
Yeah. Circling back, we are doing a podcast here. It's not about nostalgia. Tell us a little bit, Josh, about your experience and what got you involved with remote work in the first place.
As Kaleem mentioned, I went to college of the Holy Cross. I was a poli-sci major. Parents are both teachers and coaches, and I had at least initial designs to do something like that. I was living in Boston, needed a good job, went to work for Sun Life Financial, which is a big insurance company based out of Toronto, but it has a large U.S. presence. Started at the ground level and really got great paid training over a 5-year period in insurance, and cut my teeth and understood what an insurance company did, and launched a successful sales career over a 10-year period, 3 different cities, Boston, New York, Chicago, with 2 large insurance companies, the other being Lincoln Financial Group, based in Philadelphia. And then I think the thing that made me move to startups was over that 10-year period, I felt like it was a drop in the bucket versus making a ripple as far as the effect I had on the actual customer, which is the insurance broker who I called on. And I've always been an effect guy, and somebody wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to do something different and influential for the insurance broker marketplace. So I got called by College of the Holy Cross alumni who was starting something cool in technology. He said, "Josh, hey, would you consider using your insurance company knowledge to help me start the startup?" And so I moved back to Boston and started with my first startup, which was IBX.
Cool. You talked about briefly there that you were kind of flying around, and for a lot of people today, they're just now experiencing remote work. And I used to call you the air up there because you were always traveling. I'd be texting, "Where are you today?" "Oh, I'm flying out." Interestingly enough, he also lives here in Atlanta, but we'd rarely see each other because you were always traveling all the time. You were actually a remote worker. You were a part of a hybrid remote team. I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily think about that as far as salespeople who are on the road all the time. So as somebody who was a salesperson and meeting people and living in airports and traveling, once we started going remote, what were some of the concerns that you had?
I think you could call somebody that's an outside salesperson a remote employee, because I didn't really need an office. I worked from my house, or I worked from an airport, from a Delta Sky Club. My foray into remote work was traveling and working off a laptop in those environments. I got used to it. I'm more of a team guy, so I needed to find ways to connect with the home base a lot. Mm-hmm. So I started using web-based tools like Zoom and Google Meet and things like that prior to it being a necessity like it is now, and use those to connect with my team, which salespeople all over the country that were using me as a resource and needing to learn from me and me helping them with meetings and close things, but then also connect with home office people that I needed favors from and I needed to have good relationships with to get things done. So at least initially, the remote work was that experience. I think what it melded into over the last 2 years with the pandemic was, okay, I got on a plane and I got to go see customers and I got to be face to face with people at least so I could call my customers face to face. With the pandemic, that got erased. So
right.
I went from not only not getting to see the people that I worked with, but then it was also the customer base that I had grown really friendly with and depended on having face-to-face meetings to close business, not being able to see them because I couldn't get on a plane anymore and their offices were shut down. So I was scared, guys. I was worried. I was like, can I adapt enough to be influential enough to make sales on things that are pretty important to these businesses over a friggin' camera? Like, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. The cool thing is what I realized is out of necessity, I think I'm not going to be like, oh, it was my great sales techniques. Yes. I think it was from out of necessity. People were like, shit, I need to get business done. I need to make decisions. I still need to put technology in my business process. I still need to, do things. So they were like, hey, Zoom is really the only way I can make this work. So we this year closed 20 new customers, grew our book of business by over $1 million, got another $10 million worth of funding, and it was all remote sales. And it was, I'll take some credit because I was able to use some of the sales techniques that I've used for years over Zoom. So it was successful sales, but it was also just necessity. I'm not somebody who's going to be a braggart and say it was all my sales techniques. It was because people had to do it to get stuff done.
But you were forced into it like a lot of other people were. You either adapted or you got left behind. How were you able to balance all these new things that you had to learn, new mechanisms, new methods, I should say, as well as being at home with your family? I mean, because that talk about a double whammy.
Whammy.
Whammy. Another one.
Whammy.
Whammy. Yes, that's a great question, Rick. One, I'd never really set up my home office. I always thought that was a joke. Like when people were like, yeah, I got a home office, I'd be like, okay, so that's a way that you get to sit around, twiddle your thumbs, watch Netflix and not work as hard as other people. I think some people are built for it. There's been people that have had offices at their house for years and have been successful at it. I've just always defined work as, hey, I get up at 6, I get in the shower, I get in my car, I drive to my office, I plug into my computer, and I do my work. I think the first thing was like, I needed to make it comfortable and I needed to make it something that it felt like I was in a work environment. So I came into my office, I set up bookshelves, I put up I'm looking at all my pictures of Worcester and things I love and Maine and all those things that I've got to make my comforts and my things why I work hard. I made an environment that made me feel comfortable to do work. I made it quiet. I put up a printer and a whiteboard that I use still today to make notes and remind myself to do things. And I got a great microphone, a great screen setup, and a great video camera so that I could make myself look and sound somewhat professional. So I think it's all preparation that led me to feel like I could do this and do it in an environment that was in my home office. The outside noise and the things that were happening, I think you just have to be patient. I think your kids, like you think about it, what's more important? A customer thinking that you have kids at home, by the way, they have kids at home too, and they're screaming and yelling, or your kids' education. I'm like, when you weigh it that way, I want my kids to be educated. If it's at home, if it's on virtual, like it is what it is. So the interruptions and the funny stuff that my son says when he comes through the door and yells at me when I'm on a business call, I use that as humor and move it into my sales pitch. And people laugh and think it's funny. And they're like, oh, this guy can recover. He loves his kids. And it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme.
You're mentioning something that I'm hoping that sticks around even after the pandemic. And you talk about family. And before, again, joking, you were George Clooney, the heir up there. If you haven't seen that movie, check it out. Before, you were what you explained about going to the office and getting up and then always being in an airport and flying, you had a lot of separation. It was built in. And for a lot of people, that's critical. That's critical to be able to have that work then family, work then family. A lot of people use work-life balance, and I know listeners, you're going to hear me say it again, we use work-life integration. But since we've made this change of the kids coming into the camera, do you feel like from a sales perspective, you were able to still build those connections on camera? Do you feel like you were able to connect? Do you feel like people are more empathetic? And do you feel like remote sales is a good thing?
Yeah, it's funny. Rick and I was in a shoe store the other day, and Rick called me and we were talking, and I think something that I strive for that I think's been lacking in my business for the last 23 years is that remote work is brought into it is personalization. It's like you're working in your house, you're around your kids, you're in your home environment. So like, why shouldn't somebody see that? Why shouldn't somebody, like the people who I want to work with, they don't give a shit about whether a kid walks on a camera or not. Like the people who I want to work with, they have those same challenges. Like so I think it's something you can identify. Like when you sell to somebody, the thing that makes them like you is to be able to identify something in your life that's a lot like their life. That's right. A huge sales technique. Wow, that guy has that and I have that. We both have to deal with that problem. That's cool. That's a connection. So I think remote work is when the kid's walking in the camera and like me wearing shorts and a dress shirt like I am right now. And it's all funny. It's humanizing. And I think it's humanized the sales process and also just relationship building. So it's cool.
That's the word right there, humanizing. I think that this whole experience, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the shift in work culture, and certainly with the way that people treat each other these days, I think what we've all lost sight of is that regardless of what we do and what our situations are, we're all human. And when we can see each other being humans, it kind of breaks down the barrier a little bit.
Yeah. I think you summed it up pretty good there. It does break down the barrier.
Yeah, I just think it's important. When I was younger and I started my sales career, I was a little scared to speak to a CEO or somebody that ran a company or like that you considered a bigwig because you hadn't experienced the same things they had. And you always put them on a pedestal. And I think now I know from having sat in some of those executive seats myself and now having friends that do that, they do the same crazy stuff that we did. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like we do every single morning. Hopefully, I think it breaks down the barriers of the roles separation. Like, well, I'm only a salesperson, but you're a CEO. I don't know if I can talk to you or ask you that question. That's not true. Again, it goes back to everyone's a human. Everyone's got things they want to accomplish. I think this breaks down the roles barrier as well. Like people all have to get on camera. People have kids running behind them. So it's that part of it's interesting too.
Well, it's funny you say that because my first experience with those types of things, I was another podcast I did where I was interviewing with celebrities, people who were far more popular than I will ever be probably. And I found myself like,
it's not true. You're famous now. You're famous Rick.
I am famous. Famous Rick. That's my new name. Hey, it's Famous Rick. Good to see you.
What's happening?
Hey.
Wicked.
So right. So anyway, I lost track there. But when I was talking to these people and I'm thinking in my head, in my mind, they hadn't been human yet because the only way I knew them was because of a character they had played or something they had done in the spotlight, which wasn't really their persona. So I kind of had to really get into the moment and understand these are just people. And some of them are pretty fucking weird. They're not regular people at all.
No.
So
get a few Piccadillys.
Yeah, right.
Whoa. Let's talk about Piccadillys, Bob. Piccadilly?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What is a Piccadilly?
It's like an odd thing about somebody, I think. I don't know. That's how I've used it. I didn't look it up prior to the podcast, so I'll need to go look at the definition again.
Why do I have Piccadilly Pub in my mind? Why do I
That's a
have
real place.
We're going to the Piccadilly pub. Yeehaw! I don't know why. I don't know why it's in my mind.
I
I don't know.
Well,
don't know.
I'll tell you something about the Piccadilly pub. I used to go there a lot, but everything went cattywampus, and I can't go there anymore.
Fuck.
Oh boy.
Oh, I love this shit. I mean, like, people get paid to do this, by the way.
Does everyone know that all three of us are from Maine in the same town, by the way? I don't think we even said that in the beginning of the podcast.
Well, yeah, you said Maine, but you never mentioned that we all went to Bangor High School.
Same high school, same town, same girls that we danced with at the Bounty, all that. Same
All
coaches,
the same.
by the way, that was my dad.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Coach Morse.
Shout out, hell of a
legend.
guy.
Shout out, shout out. So you've been in the startup scene for a minute, a lot in the insurance space. Actually, how do you feel the insurance industry is coping right now with not being able to travel and not being in offices? So I'm in Atlanta in Sandy Springs, and I know, Josh, you're up in the Alpharetta area, and Rick's in Charlotte. And all of these areas are very big financial places and insurance places. State Farm's corporate offices are here in Sandy Springs. They built these huge, giant skyscrapers for all their employees to come to. How is the insurance industry coping, you think, right now? How are they doing with the return to office and the traditional versus workplace flexibility?
Yeah, I think everyone's dealing with it the best they can. I think, I mentioned in the beginning of my career being very used to going into the office and working in offices. That was due to the fact that that's the setup for an insurance company. Everything was done inside of an office. Everything was done on a plane or in a customer inside of a broker's office. To this day, most of the deals have been done face to face. So some industries had already started to go remote and be a little bit more flexible when it came to being in person. Insurance was not one of those. So as industries go, I think it was probably one of the industries that needed to change the most based on the pandemic. I think, fortunately for the insurance industry, the insurtech market, which is the market I'm in at Layr, that's the market that's been on, first of all, it's on fire from an M&A perspective and an investment perspective. Secondly, it's a market that's been trying to disrupt and change some of that face-to-face necessity for, the last 5 to 10 to 15 years. So I think the large battleships, the ones that have the ways of doing things and the more traditional ways of doing things, those are changing slower. And the motorboats are the smaller ships that get to turn quicker and are a little bit more agile, like the insurtechs that involve technology and business process and things like that, like the company I work for. I think those are helping to change the industry a little bit faster. So I think it's going to be a gradual change because you got a lot of battleships and not as many motorboats, and a lot of the businesses with the battleships. But there's a lot of signs lately that the industry is turning towards a more remote workforce and having to make changes based on the pandemic. So
yeah, I love that analogy too. I think I've heard that before, the big cruise ships versus the motorboats. Big companies take a long time. There's a lot of great startups here in Atlanta. You got the Kaleems, and you got some of the MailChimps. You got some really big companies coming out of the Atlanta Tech Village. Shout out David Cummings, thank you for building that wonderful place. So in the whole startup scene, traditionally it was about building this dope ass office and having the ping pong table and just really creating that fun, energetic, work hard, play hard, in-person workplace culture. Like, that's where a lot of this stuff from the startup scene started. As the competition for talent has exploded this year, people are leaving jobs every day. Where are you seeing the challenges for startups moving forward who want that traditional in-office culture after the pandemic's over? Where are you seeing those challenges, especially in a tech development driven where the developer is king right now? How do you advise a company that's like, no, I want this in-office culture as soon as we can get there?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things that are challenging the startup community. I think labor is really tough right now. Like, the labor market is super tight. There's higher salaries. So startups that don't have a ton of money to go spend, they've got to be nimble about how they spend the money they have allocated for salaries and people. And you've got to do more with less as far as the number of people you can bring on. So I think the labor market's certainly challenging right now. I think it's a good time to be an employee, a tough time to be an employer, which by the way is great, because I think that's awesome for the employees. I think there's people coming out of, you mentioned developers, there's people coming out of college that get or not even out of college, and they have 2 years worth of coding experience, and they're making, upper, mid six figures now. And I think people are realizing what's important and what's valuable. And from a labor market perspective, at least, I think from how we view it, the remote work transition has allowed us to look more globally for employees, not just in the United States. So, we don't need everybody that's a programmer to work in New York City or San Francisco or wherever, or Utah, which are prevalent places for programmers in the United States. They can work in India, they can work in Eastern Bloc countries, they can work pretty much wherever and there's really talented people over there, and the expense level isn't as high. So we as a company need to be flexible in where we recruit, and our recruiting has moved from just the US to more globally in order to be competitive. So we're challenged, but we're also finding people in other places as far as that want to work for a startup in the United States. I think one of the other big challenges is just separating yourself from your competition while you're not being able to be face to face, so marketing and Google Ads campaigns and SEO and all the things that you have to refine your skills on to be able to be seen and single yourself out from your competition. You got to be really good at that, and you have to be nimble. And again, you have to be pretty spendthrift about it too, so you don't spend a ton of money on that. Labor force, marketing, and then just culture, trying to build a culture in this day and age. I think one of the most awkward things I've ever seen has been the people trying to do happy hours or magic shows on Zoom. There has been some of the most awkward, silencing, just not good culture building moments in some of those stuff that's not funny. How do you get past that when it's just not funny on a Zoom call? You're going to see everyone and you're going to see their facial expressions and nobody's face is moving. I mean, that's horrible. I feel bad for the person who's trying to create that type of environment and it's not face to face. Some of it just doesn't translate. So coming up with ideas to try and build values and culture to make it feel like it's a company, that's really hard, because that's what, you mentioned, Kaleem, the snack cabinets, the polished cement floors, the foosball tables, the happy hours of the bar they built in the back corner. All that stuff was how because you spend time together, that was how you built culture. So it's how do you build culture without that? I think one answer we've had is onboarding, the onboarding process. You've got to send swag. You got to make somebody feel at home. You got to make sure they got the right equipment, that they're set up for training the first day, that they feel like their home office is a home office like I said it was, where it's set up for you to do work, but it feels like an office. Make them feel welcome. And that's, Gen Z and Gen X people don't want to go out and they don't want to after hours go back to Best Buy and buy their friggin' monitors. That's not what they want to do.
It's not happening.
No. So
they're not going to take the job. They're going to go get another job immediately.
Get them set up for success. Get their equipment set up. Make them feel at home. Do the right things in onboarding people, and I think you set yourself up for success when it comes to building culture.
It's funny you mentioned that, the bar in the corner. I sold more kegerators and built more draft systems for office places than I did for anybody else before the pandemic hit. And then when people started getting more comfortable with each other and going back into the offices, I was getting calls saying, yeah, we built us a kegerator, but we haven't used it in almost 2 years, and we'd like to use it again. Can we just open it up? And I'm like, no, you can't. It's
disgusting.
You gotta flush your out,
fumigate
Bob.
That shit. Yeah, we gotta fumigate that shit. Clear the building, and so I found myself talking to these people, and I said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Is this the right time? You might want to just keep it down." No, no, we want everybody coming back. This is why we built this. We're glad you're here. We want to have you fix it for us so that we can use it again. And I said, I think it might be a little premature. And it's being behind the scenes. It's fascinating to watch. So your insight there is spot on. Like the thing that brought people together is no longer the thing that's bringing people together. So
Yeah, you mentioned the Zoom culture things and building culture. And I love the fact that you talked about onboarding, of course, something that we're pretty passionate about. Because a lot of people do believe that the culture was the ping pong table, it was the kegerator, it was those things, but it actually wasn't. It was the time that you spent talking with your colleague at the kegerator, the time that you spent with your colleagues at the ping pong table. It wasn't the ping pong table that created that. I have a colleague that does comedy, does improv comedy on Zoom, and it's absolutely hysterical. It's great. It's great. And the reason why it's great is because everyone's participating and you're creating, like, there's certain things. You're absolutely right. The happy hour on Zoom is just not cool. Like, what do? You're just sitting there looking at each other. It was cool like the first 2 months, just for the first time that you could do it. But then obviously over time, people were just like, nah, we're done with these. But I think it's really fascinating to think about how do you, and literally that's what we attempt to do, is build that culture. It's all of the things that are boring. Like, what's your employee engagement strategy gonna look like? What's your personal development strategy like? What's your offboarding strategy? All of those things are what kind of culminates into like this thing of engagement and what we kind of term, or not we, but everyone terms the employee experience. So it can be done, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of strategic and it takes resources. That's why people ops right now, if you look at job ads, the job ads for people operations have grown something like, I don't know the number, but it's like 40 or 50% or something like that, because it takes so much planning. Once we come out of this pandemic, if companies are going to stay remote, what's your retreat going to look like?
Yeah.
When you come together, are you going to have fun? Are you going to make it like a work thing? So there's just so many things that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I think it takes you back to like what matters to somebody about work. So we started with this whole not gotta go into work 9 to 5, John. Gotta, you get up at 6:30, you take your shower, you get to work, you drink your cup of coffee, you get your paper. You're gonna talk to Bill in the next cube over for about a half an hour, and then you're gonna log in and then you're going to get your work done. And for 20 years, people just got swallowed by that work culture, and you were just a number and you were a cog in the wheel, and nobody thought about culture really back then. Some people did, but they were innovative and they were probably pretty successful, I think. Yeah. And then you went into this startup world where everyone was like, polish your cement floors, open up a bar, do a ping pong table, do a, jump on pogo sticks around your office twice a week. And
was that? Are you serious? Like, the pogo sticks? I've never seen that.
No, make it this like I just made that up on the fly. But
nice.
Make it this like novelty where people like made that their culture. I think all of it did was it surfaced like what actually matters, and that's values. Like, what's your company values? Is it grit? Is it hard work? Is it empathy? Is it all? Leaders have to actually come up with what matters as a company and what employees would identify with. And then you have to recruit, retain, and hire and fire on those values. Because like when the beer keg dissolves, Rick, and like you can't serve beer or the keg kicks, like what's your battle cry at that point? Like, how do you get people excited?
That. What's your battle cry?
You got to take them back to the values, because that's why they stay. Yeah. They stay because they believe in what the company's doing and they believe in leadership. So I think all this, you talk about what the pandemic has done, but it's also just like the way work has evolved. It went from just it's what you do to, wow, this is awesome. Like wow factor, like my snack cabinet is best, to now it's what the company does and how it's going to change the world and how it's going to help employees make a difference. So
yeah, I like to think of it as it's all basically the evolution of the water cooler. We used to have a bunch of guys hanging out at the water cooler. That was social time. Hey, Johnny, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I got fucked up at the bounty. You know, what did you do? You know, and then and then over time,
and Jane hates the water cooler. Jane hates the water cooler because she's like, I don't want to talk about Monday Night Football. Right. I don't want to play golf. So she's like, I don't even want to stand.
And I don't want to talk about the song I danced on the bounty speaker.
That's right. That's right. When that water cooler went stale and the water bottle dried up, it became a bar. It became a kegerator. It became a pool ping pong table. And so really, it just kind of carried up and became like a magnet or a hook to bring people in and say, this is who we are. You know, we don't really work here. We work hard behind the scenes, but, you know, this is really what we're all about. And none of that shit really mattered. I mean, it did. It brought good people in, but it also kind of sent a false flag, in my opinion. It was like, you know, this isn't social hour. We're here to work, but we do have these things that are kind of cool. And it's way better than a water cooler.
Yeah, I mean, it highlighted, like, if you ask your people that work for you why they stay, and they say it was because I like the people I work with, that's not a good strategy, dude. Because those people leave.
Right.
People leave.
Right.
They should leave.
Yeah.
So if you base your decision on whether you like your company about the people, like, that's not something you can sell to somebody else that has intrinsic value. Like, if I go to my VC or my private equity and I say, you know, everyone stays because they like the people. Well, that's not something that they would put a ton of value on. What they put a ton of value on is are your values good? Whoever works next, would they be able to follow those values? Is the technology good? Is the business process? Does your market need what you're selling? Those kinds of things. That's really what somebody's going to pay for. So hanging around the beer cooler or whatever it is and making relationships, that's great because it helps you get in the fight together when you're fighting. But like, what happens after the fight's over?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So switching gears a little bit, Josh, share with us something comical that you may have experienced remotely.
So I was on a call with a large potential customer. I had been courting this customer for probably solid 6 months to try and get him on the phone to like really have a deep dive into what we do and understand a little bit more about their need. So I was psyched. I had gone out and I told my wife, I was like, listen, I need to put the do not disturb on my office. Please don't have anybody come in. I can't have anybody come in. I put a suit on, like I dressed up for the first time in probably 6 months. I had a great agenda. I prepared my team, probably 6 weeks of preparation for the presentation, the demo, everything. And I felt so good about it because I was friggin' prepared. So halfway through the demo, I'm in the middle of a technology demo. My son comes bursting through the door. And my wife has had to step outside because the dogs had run away or something, and she had to go gather them. And my son walks through the door and he out loud says, "Daddy, I just pooped my pants." And he kept saying it, and I kept trying to find mute, but I couldn't get to mute fast enough.
Please mute.
No.
Please mute.
Everyone on the call is just dying. And some of them, I mean, everyone on the call is dying, and I am mortified. My head went to a shade of tomato, and but again, it goes back to like those humanizing moments. Like those people will never forget that. Like I still talk. They became a customer.
Poopy pants.
Oh, that's
like
good.
Just saying the phrase "poopy pants."
Yeah,
makes me smile. So I'm sure they were loving it.
Yeah, that's that I was mortified. It was probably one of the first times like that kind of burst in happened. And it always goes back to poop with boys, so it's like, you know.
Well, yeah, I'm 45 years old, and farts are always funny to me. I mean, I laugh every time somebody cuts one out. You know, it's like, you know, and that's how my kids are, and I think it's hilarious. Fantastic. Yeah. Josh Morse, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thank you, Mr. Morse. Appreciate you.
Guys,
Yeah.
this was awesome. It's great to connect with you both.
Yeah, we got some good outtakes too, I believe.
Can't wait to see those.
Well, Josh, tell us where our listeners can find you.
Yeah, you can find us at www.withlayr.com. And we got a great website that can help you understand what Layr's doing to help improve the insurance industry on a whole.
Cool. How about your
Fantastic.
social medias?
Yeah, you can get me on LinkedIn, you can get me on Instagram, and you can get me on old school Facebook. Josh Morse.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right,
Good to
fellas.
see you again, buddy.
Good to
Take
see
care.
you.
Have a good day, guys.
Later.
You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.